Hi everybody, I'm Dave from HelpSpot. Today I want to talk to you about something you should think about doing after you've been using HelpSpot for a while. It's what we call a HelpSpot audit. So there are 5 major components to the HelpSpot audit: filters, automation, live lookup, response, and reports. Let's start by diving into filters. So we've got some filters over here on the left-hand side. You hopefully know about them, but really quick overview here. You hopefully know about filters, but a real quick overview. Filters allow you to create basically any view into the request in HelpSpot you might want. Maybe you want to see everything that's open. As you can see here in this example, maybe I want to see everything that's open by a certain person. I can see Taryn has 6 requests open. I can see Matt only has 1. Maybe I want to see it by category, right? I can see I've got 10 in sales, I've got 1 in demo, etc., etc. There's all kinds of creative things you can use filters for. So I'm going to assume, hopefully, that you know about that. And what I want to talk about instead is the idea of filter management, right? Are there filters that aren't being used at all? Can you eliminate ones that maybe don't make sense anymore, right? So if I look at these are the filters that I can see, but if I go here to admin, and then I go all the way down here on the left-hand side under system, filter management. So here's a list of all the filters that I've got. You can see how long they take to run, which is really interesting, right? Because you can do really complex things with filters. HelpSpot obviously is designed to be very fast, but if it's a situation where maybe you can't make it fast, or maybe you've got a really complex filter and you're trying to figure out what's going on, you can look and you can kind of scroll and see how long do they take to run, what's going on. You can also see things like how often are they run. So if you're trying to figure out, do I need this request anymore? I think here's an interesting one, right? I can look and I can see, wow, these 2 filters have never been run ever. I should probably go ahead and just delete them because I don't need them, right? So this is just a great page to go to. And if you had a problem filter, and what we mean by that is a filter that's taking a long time to run, HelpSpot will identify those and put them up here in recent problem filters. So that's a really good place to look if you are trying to get to the bottom, or honestly, you're just curious. You've got a moment, you want to clean up what's going on in HelpSpot. Head here to admin under system, filter management. Make sure you don't have any problem filters. The second thing I want to talk about, I'm going to jump back to the workspace so we can look at a filter again really quick here. I'm going to go ahead and make a new filter. Let's think about the kind of filters that maybe you aren't using right now. So filters, obviously we already talked about examples like open by agent, open by category, but there's a whole lot more you can do with them. Let's build a filter really quickly right now, and I'm going to call this stale requests. I'm going to say I want this, I only want this to be viewable by me. I do want to display the count in the workspace. If you've ever wondered what that option means, you see here next to all open, see that number 77? That's what that checkbox does. So if you want to see how many requests are in a filter, check that off. It'll show it right there, just like Inbox and MyQ do. And now I'm going to go ahead and say, what do I want to be in this filter? So I wanted to show me things that are open, but now I also wanted to show me things that, and this is where we get into some really fun date and time math that filters have. There are other parts of HelpSpot that have this as well. If you aren't taking advantage of this, I would really recommend doing so, at least poking around, seeing what you can find. And so we've got this idea of minutes since last update. So once I choose that, you'll see I've got some options. Do I want to see less than or greater than? In this case, I want to see greater than, and it's in minutes. But I'm going to use this handy dandy calculator here, and I'm going to say, show me anything more than 4 days. And I'm going to insert that, and it just auto calculates. So if I save this filter, this is going to show me everything in HelpSpot where it's open, and it's been more than 4 days since it was updated at all. So if I am trying to clear out old requests, if I'm trying to see what things are stuck, we haven't updated it, the customer hasn't updated, there's been no public or private updates of any kind, no updates of any kind, I could run this filter and I could be like, and this could give me a list of things that are stuck. And maybe they're stuck for good reasons, right? Maybe this is an opportunity to go through those and reach out to customers. Maybe it's a good opportunity to talk to your folks internally on your staff and say, hey, what's going on with this? And of course, just like you would expect with filters, you can then further filter this down, hence the name. So I could say, you know what, actually, I also want to say only things in a particular category or things that match a particular custom field. I could do other date and time math, all kinds of things that I could do to really filter this down. And of course, I could save it. And then under options, I've got all again, all kinds of options, right? I can decide what columns I want to be displayed. I can decide how do I want this to be sorted. I can group requests, which if you don't know about filters, this is something you can do with filters you can't do in the inbox of the MyQ page. I could decide how do I want to group this. Maybe I want to group this by the date it came in. If I have a date custom field, you can group by that as well, right? So if you're trying to if you have a due date or some sort of date custom field and you want to have a filter that groups by that, you can do that. It's really useful to at a glance see what's due today, what's due tomorrow, etc. All kinds of options here. Or I could just have this be standard and it's showing me everything that's open, everything where it's been minutes more than that since the last update. I'm going to run this filter. It's going to show me lots of things because this is a demo install of HelpSpot that we use for things like videos and demos. But you get the idea. It would show you everything, and this would kind of give you a glimpse at this is what it's going to show me on the filter page, and maybe I want to group this differently. So I could come here to options and I could say, you know what, actually I want to group this by the category, and now when I run the filter, you can see that now it's grouping by category. This one's uncategorized, this one's got demo, general sales, etc. So lots of ways that you could potentially take a fresh look at filters if you haven't in a little while. Next, let's talk about automation. So I go to admin, and then on the left-hand side, underneath triggers and rules, HelpSpot has 3 kinds of ways to do automation. Quick recap if you've never done this before. Triggers perform actions in real time. Basically, actually, to be more specific, they watch for changes in real time and then perform actions instantaneously. These can be used in a couple things, and we'll go over those in just a second. Automation rules are similar but more powerful because they operate on a set schedule. So there are more capabilities here because under run schedule, you'll see here, right down here, I can decide, do I want this to run as frequently as every minute? So for some use cases, it's actually basically just as fast as a trigger, and so you get more power. Or you can do interesting things with daily automation rules, and we'll show you some examples there. The final kind of automation rule is a mail rule. So these look at incoming mails into your HelpSpot instance and do actions based on the rules you've set up. Things like if the subject line has this phrase, assign it to this person in this category, things like that. So that's actually a great example. Let's sort of work backwards. Let's start there. So really quick, if you've never seen this before, a quick kind of mail rule. Let's say the subject contains payroll. I know if it contains the phrase payroll, I'm going to set a category, and I'm going to set that to HR, and I know that that's always going to go to me every single time. Maybe I'm the payroll expert. You're going to have different categories, of course, but just to give you a quick idea of how that would work. So as you're taking a look at things like mail rules, automation rules, and triggers, and as I'm describing how these might work, think about routine actions that you do, that your team does, or maybe just things that you could take advantage of to make your life a little bit easier. Maybe you have things that you're viewing in filters that could be replaced or supplemented by an automation. Here's a great example. So I used that filter example before of a stale request. Well, what if I did something automatically based off of that? So let's do the following. So let's say I want this rule to run every minute. We've got some options here. I want to run this rule once per request. That's correct. I don't want it to automatically, in some cases, I don't want to receive it every minute if I keep having stale requests. Conversely, if I did something daily and I wanted a daily report basically of stale requests, maybe I do want to uncheck that because I always want to be notified. But in this case, we'll do this. We'll say every minute, and I want to run this once per request, and we're going to say, okay, show me things that are open. And we're going to say minutes since last update is greater than, and again, I'll use my handy dandy calculator. We'll say 4 days. Let's insert that. And you can test the conditions, so you can kind of get an example. In this case, it's that 50 count that I don't know if you paid close attention before. You saw that when we had the filter before. Now here's what's really fun. What do I want to happen? Maybe I want to set a custom field because I have an SLA and I know if this is still open, it's broken. So maybe I say, yep, I want to check this off, or maybe I want to do something else. You could reassign it to somebody. You could say, you know what, if it's open past a certain period of time, I just want all those to be bumped up to the next person. But you can stack things, and you can even be a little proactive about things. Here's an example of how you can do that. You could email the customer, right? And you can use placeholders so that you're saying using the customer's first name, last name, etc. So, you could say update from, in this case, it'd be HelpSpot because we are HelpSpot. You would put your own company's name, and you could say about request number, and then I can insert this placeholder for the request ID. And let's go ahead and put that up here in the subject. Great. Okay. So update from HelpSpot about request ID. And maybe I just want to say something like, hello, and we're going to insert the customer's first name. Great. And I'm going to say, you can even, if I come down here, you can even do things like insert the original request note. So you could say, you wrote us about, however you wanted to word this, right? This is not a great example, apologies. But you could include things like the initial request for reference if you need to. You could say, we're still waiting to hear from you if you wanted to go in that way. But you could also say something like, hello, customer first. Thank you for your patience as our team works to resolve your problem. You could write this however you want, right? So in this case, let's just say that's the email we want to send. Maybe I've got some more placeholders. Great. I want to email the customer because this is just sitting there and something's wrong. And I want to know, thank you. We are waiting. And that's awesome. Okay, great. Maybe I also want to stack here and I want to go, you know what? Let's also send an email notification to the person it's assigned to and basically say, hey, take a look at this now. Maybe I then also, and now we're getting to really interesting stuff. Maybe I want to subscribe somebody. Maybe I'm not assigned to this request, but I want to be subscribed to it. So as a quick refresher, in HelpSpot, you can subscribe to updates about requests even if you're not assigned to them. So maybe this is indicating, you know what, this is stale. I'm the manager. I want to stay on top of this. So, yep, I want to email the customer automatically. I want to email the person who's assigned to it automatically. And I also want to be subscribed to updates about this. So I could set this up and it's just going to run whenever I want. And if you take advantage in HelpSpot of putting business hours into HelpSpot, you can even, define, do I want this to run during business hours, outside of business hours, or at all times. So that's an example, right, of maybe I had a filter showing me stale requests, but now I can still view them, but now I can take that same logic, that same combination of conditions, and now I can do things automatically, which is fantastic. The other thing I would encourage you to do, if you have, and let's go back out to automation rules here. So I don't have any here. I don't have any triggers. This is a demo, not a whole lot of examples here. But if you are taking advantage of triggers and automation rules or mail rules, take a fresh look. Come to these pages, take a fresh look and see, are these not in use anymore? Do these all make sense? Especially if you have triggers, because those run instantaneously. Maybe there are triggers somebody set up once upon a time that might have made sense 5 years ago, 2 years ago, however long ago, and now they don't. Take a fresh look at this, come in here, audit it, just like the name of this video says, right? Take a look, see what you can find. The next thing I want to talk about, if you're doing a HelpSpot audit, if you're taking a fresh look at things, is the idea of live lookup. So I'm going to jump into a request here. This is one I use for testing because there's all kinds of back and forth. If you've probably noticed this tab on HelpSpot. So live lookup is just a quick refresher. It is a way to connect HelpSpot to virtually any system of record you have. Could be CRM, could be Active Directory, a custom database, anything you have API or database access to. HelpSpot should be able to connect to it and then pull in information from that system and not only display it here, as you see in this example, but it can also populate custom fields on the right-hand side here, right? So due date, location, things like that. So if you have information about the people that you are supporting in some other database, you should absolutely consider taking a look at live lookup to see can your team figure out, can your team come up with some fields they might want? Is there a use case for this? And look at our documentation, which is great for how to create this little connection. It's not the most complicated thing to do, but it does require some custom scripting. You can write it in almost any scripting language you can imagine. Again, we have documentation for this. And if you have questions about how to do this, our support team is always available to help answer and sort of point you in the right direction. So if you're not taking advantage of live lookup, think about it, especially if you're using HelpSpot for a little bit of time, because if you have people who are doing support and they're looking in one screen for one thing and another screen for another thing, and you're trying to sort of figure out who this person is, and you're trying to make this all work within the context of HelpSpot, why not bring those systems, at least the data from those systems, right into HelpSpot? Conversely, if you've been using live lookup, now that you have hopefully been using HelpSpot for a little while longer, think about are there other fields that we should be using, right? So maybe you're just viewing them here and you're not having them auto-populate custom fields. Would that be helpful, right? Why would you want to auto-populate custom fields with information from your other system? Well, you can run reports, right? So maybe you support people who are in multiple locations, or maybe even just multiple buildings as a part of a university or corporate campus. Well, if you have that information in some system of record and it would be useful to do reporting or filtering based off of that, you could do that, right? So maybe I know that in this example here, I'm located in building B. It would be useful to run reports. How many requests do we get from building B? Or this can be really useful if you're trying to send people around to do on-site support. You can create filters, right? How many? Show me all requests right now in building B, as an example, right? So there's all kinds of things that can benefit from that. So that's a really quick reminder that if you're auditing HelpSpot, you're trying to figure out how to use it more effectively. If you're not using live lookup right now, I would highly, highly suggest you do so. All right. Next up, I want to talk about responses. So we'll stay here right here in this request. So responses, hopefully you're using them. They are quick ways to have standard replies, standard responses, right in the name, to commonly asked questions, or maybe to questions that are complex and you don't want to think about them whenever they do happen, right? So things like if you're doing IT support, standard replies that you tell people as you're beginning troubleshooting. If you do HR support and you have a standard reply that links out to here's how you change your benefit information, or attachments for people who need them as they're onboarding, or whatever the case might be. Responses can be snippets of text. They can include placeholders, just like you saw earlier when we were creating automation rules. They can have attachments. They can also change things about the request, right? So responses can, as you run a response, it can change the status, the category, tags, custom fields, etc. So so that's a real quick reminder of what responses are. So if you are using responses, we have a report for that, right? So if I come over here, I'm going to go into this report and I've got response usage. So over the last couple weeks, I have used this one 3 times in demos, but you would get a report that shows how often are certain responses used, which can be really handy if you're trying to figure out which responses are we actually making use of. If I come up here to responses, you'll get a sense of like a quick overview. If you haven't taken a look at this in a while, how many responses do you have? Do I need to clean up some of these? Do some of these still make sense? One last note on responses, and I mentioned this earlier, when you're creating responses, if you're not already taking advantage of placeholders, I really recommend taking a look at them, even to update existing responses. I'm going to come here into this bank account test one that I have. So you can see we have a placeholder here of customer first. Why would I want that? Well, if I'm going to send a note and sort of routinely to people about something that I always have to answer questions about, I don't want to write their name every single time, but also I don't want to mistakenly spell it incorrectly or anything like that. So that's just one example of what placeholders are good for. There's a super long list of things. You can insert custom fields. So if you are capturing information like due date, customer ID, anything that you would like to include as a part of response, you can do that as a part of using placeholders. So as you're editing or creating a placeholder, as you're editing or creating a response, you can see this insert placeholder menu right here. The last thing I would really encourage you to look at when you are doing HelpSpot Audit is to go look at those reports. So we already took a quick look with that response usage reports. So just now that you've been using HelpSpot for a little bit of time, there are some reports that are now going to be populated with really, really great information. So a classic example, of course, is requests over time, where you're just going to see volume, how many requests are we getting, but then you can group them in all kinds of creative ways. Hour of the day, day of the week, if you're trying to understand when do I need to staff my help desk, if that's what you're operating. You can group by category if you're trying to understand which categories do we get the most requests out of. Custom fields, right? Again, if I have certain locations I support, or you can group by due date, you can group by all kinds of things. You can group by tags if you're using tags. Of course, who it's assigned to, so I can get a sense of people's workload over a month. So request over time is going to be, the more you use HelpSpot, is going to have fantastic information for you. And as a quick reminder, reports, all of them can be filtered down even once I've got this grouping, right? So I could say, okay, this is who it's assigned to, but I only want to see this for a particular category or status, no problem. I can export this data out as a CSV. I can view the raw data here along with some stats, and this is really nice, I can save it for later. So I've got this report, I want to run it routinely. Great, I can save it for later, and if I really want to, I can even have a daily report emailed daily. I could have a weekly report emailed weekly, a monthly report emailed monthly, right? If I just want to get this report automatically, you can set that up. So we've got volume reports. We've also got speed reports, a really popular one, a really common one, but one maybe you might not be thinking about. Resolution speed. So you'll see this is a more complex graph, but it's showing me the volume of requests versus the speed that it took us to resolve those requests. And again, I can group this by day, which is great. I can just see over the course of a given month or whatever my time period is, but I can also do this by hour of the day. So you'll get some really interesting patterns here in terms of when things are moving more efficiently through your team, day of the week, which can be really interesting, right? Mondays are very different than Thursdays, at least in this demo. Why is that the case? But I can also group by category, right? And I would expect that your categories are going to have different volumes to sort of resolution speed relationships. And some of those are going to make sense just because those categories are more complicated. But this is a great way to look across your team and go, does this make sense actually, right? And if you're seeing data that doesn't add up, this might be a good opportunity to dig a little deeper, talk to your team and try to figure out what's going on. And again, I can export this, I can filter this, I can save it, and I can email it. So one other kind of report that I want to show you, if you're taking advantage of the portal, we have some portal reports. So what are these for? So I'm in a demo. This is not showing me a lot of information here because people aren't really searching on our portal and not getting things. That's just not how demos work. But what this would show you is this would give you information about what people are searching for and not finding information about. So why is that useful? Well, this is a great way to get a quick snapshot of what documentation do I need to create that doesn't exist yet. So I actually have a thing I do every 2 weeks. I go in our actual HelpSpot installation and I look at this report and try to figure out what are people searching for that they're not finding. If I see something that makes sense, start writing documentation for it. It can be a really handy way to get a handle on that. Other things is you can just see raw searches, like what are people searching for? And then on each knowledge book page, there's something that people can say, is this helpful or not? And so this is also a great way to sort of score and figure out, I've created this documentation. Is it actually helpful? So some really interesting reports that you can get there. So that wraps up this quick little look at what a HelpSpot audit could be. If you've been using HelpSpot for a while, this is a great opportunity to dive in again to reports, to responses, to live lookup, to filters, and to automation. If you have questions about any of this, please don't hesitate. Visit support.helpspot.com, send us a ticket, call us, email us, whatever you need to do. We are happy to answer your questions and help you out as you try to use HelpSpot even better. Thanks so much, everybody.